This is an audio test. This is an audio test.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could invite you to take a seat and we will get started. Should have some music playing and then you raise the music. Grab a drink, grab a slice of pizza, and let's grab a seat. Is it? That's all right. I got it. Awesome. All right. Kia ora tātou katoa, ko rongitoto tomonga, ko ochikoto te awa. You might know where that is. No Africa aho. No Miles toko whānau, ko Kolat toko ingoa. Good evening, everyone. My name's Kolat Miles. Welcome to TechTalk. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, welcome tonight. I'm going to be your host. So my job is to kind of get us through a cool agenda tonight. We've got 4 speakers on the roll. Our amazing topic is, well, that's all disappeared.
So it is.
Can I get my original slide back? Thank you, sir. So as you know, this is part of a series of 6 talks done monthly over the next 6 months. And our theme for tonight, the overarching theme is digital lean, enhancing organizational performance and applying the sort of Industry 4.0 principles. And there are quite a few people tonight that are deep students of Industry 4.0 and practitioners and leaders and coaches that are helping businesses around New Zealand with these principles, get them started. Actually, I wonder if I could get a quick show of hands who's sort of in that space, whose sweet spot is Industry 4.0 topics at the moment. So we've got one over there, we've got Adrian. Yeah, look at that. So take a look around the hands that are up. Grab a when we get a break, please grab them for a quick beersy or whatever and exchange details and be curious. This is a hot topic and a very important one for our economy. Cool. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm on a mission to help build beautiful businesses. That's kind of my thing. I realized a little while ago when I had a son and I've been meeting people tonight, got lots of kids. Hands up, who's got kids in the room? Heaps of kids, yes. So I wonder what a day in the life for them will be like in 20 years from today, right? I think according to Siri, it's a Sunday. And if they wake up on a Sunday, what kind of stories will they see in the news? What kind of week will they be facing into 20 years' time, right? Like it's kind of, I think, important for us to imagine that, not just interesting, because the world that you're imagining kind of, I'm hoping, is a better one than we're pointing at the moment. So that's my thing. I'm trying to be a part of the conversation that steers us to that version of that day for your kid in 20 years' time that's actually a better one than the ones that we've been facing. And the times are upon us, right? Okay? Turbulence and exponential. I think that's old news now, all right? So yeah, building beautiful businesses, that's my thing. I honestly believe that business and technology, and I'm looking at people that are in both camps, in all camps, play a vital role in helping us to better steer for the future that we want. And I work with a company called Surge Coach, and we partner with leaders to optimize value and performance in businesses. Our particular speciality is around business agility. So I think it's a key component and a best friend, a BFF of Industry 4.0 principles. So that's kind of where I fit into the world. I met Masood at Techtorium a couple of years ago when he had this half-baked idea, and he was super passionate and his eyes were shining, and he said, you know what, I would like to pull one of these talks together. And he worked with the faculty, and Techtorium supported him. Sam Hutchison had that vision to support him to get a conversation going that would bring industry, that would bring academics, that would bring learners. All right, guess what? We're all learners. Bring us all together in the same place and have a conversation, because I think it's sorely needed, right? Too often we kind of get fragmented and we pull apart. So these are opportunities to knit our community closer together and shape what happens next. So that's a little bit about Tech Talk. I think I'll swing forward. That was me. Do you guys recognize that guy? Pretty handsome. I hope that none of you are watching breakfast TV this morning. Anyway. Cool. Quick housekeeping. So any medical emergencies, put your hand up, jump up and down and tell us that you're having a problem, or not. But please look out for each other if something happens, and we'll get emergency services down here and do the thing. In the event of fire, follow the fire escape signs. Earthquake, drop, cover, and roll. And yes, I think there's a couple more in here around COVID-19 protocols. Would request that you make sure you use the COVID app, the Tracer app, or if you've got Bluetooth, switch that on. Wash your hands. Be conscious of the people that you're interacting tonight. I know these are just the conditions that we're in. We don't want to make it easy for the virus. So if we can do our part, that'll be really cool. If you like, we can actually invoke a bit of a protocol, and we'll try it in a minute. But we can do elbow touches. And if you really like the person, elbow touch and ankle touch. And if you really, really, really like the person, it's elbow touch, ankle touch, and a little boogie. So if we see that tonight, I'll be impressed. All right. So that's a bit about COVID-19. Social media, I just got to say a massive shout out to our live stream. We're out on YouTube at the moment, so to our live stream audience, haramai, welcome. It's a lovely evening in New Zealand. Interestingly enough, we have 15 countries in the audience out there, and they've been keenly following Tech Talk through the whole of last year, and this is the first one we're hosting for this year. So it's a pretty amazing feeling to have the whole world connected up suddenly. Suddenly geography doesn't matter too much. Time zones do, but geography maybe a little bit less. Social media, we've got hashtag Tech Talk, so please encourage you to engage with the audiences outside of the room. They're as much a part of this conversation as you are. So please use that, take pictures, share links and all that sort of good stuff. There will also be a short survey questionnaire at the end. We'll remind you of that a little bit later. Am I forgetting anything? Masood? No? So far, so good. All right. Just please give me a nod or a little hand signal if you need me to slow down. All right. So let's just give a massive shout out right now. Tonight would not be possible without partners like IMS Projects. We've got Adrian here tonight from IMS. So please, can you give them a round of applause for supporting us? Awesome, mate. Thank you. And the amazing team, ongoing, never-ending support from the Techtorium side. They're hosting us with a venue, and they've just been alongside for the whole journey. And Sam Hutchinson's here to represent Tech. Kia ora, my friend. Thank you. And of course, all the volunteers, none of this happens in the front without a whole bunch of people in the back. So we'll just give a quick round of applause to the hospitality, all the volunteers. To Ben over there, he's my main man tonight. He's going to help us with all the technical gremlins and whatnots. So this is shaping up to be a really special night. So I think we're very privileged in a lot of ways because our part of the world is quite protected. There's a lot of stuff going on around the rest of the world, even our audience. We hope that you're doing okay, and we're just acknowledging that the world is still in a state, and that we have this massive privilege to be able to gather tonight. So we're going to hold that carefully. Can I encourage you, please, to learn as much as you can tonight? You're going to hear from 4 amazing speakers. They've got interesting perspectives. They've got knowledge that they're going to share tonight, and it's quite stimulating. So I encourage you to really lean into that with an open mind and pull it in, and let's kind of make it part of our community again. Number 2, my other request is meet as many new people as you possibly can. All right, let's not spread the virus. but let's at least try and get our community connected together. So tonight, please, by the end, I would hope that you have met a lot of new people. And have a little think right now. I'm going to ask you to talk about it in a minute. But have a little think about what brought you along tonight. What's the thing that you're kind of hoping to get out of hanging out tonight with us at TechTalk? All right? And you'll get a chance to share it with the person around you in a minute. Okay. And most of all, relax, make yourself at home. There's Kai, there's drinks from our amazing hosts. And, you know, this is our home for tonight. So, you know, welcome again. Let's make this happen. Awesome. Kia ora. Cool. So I think I'm going to ask our host, Sam Hutchinson, to come up. And that's before we welcome our first speaker in. Sam, representing Techtorium. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks,
yeah.
Appreciate it.
Tell us all about it.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Techtorium for what I believe is the first hybrid event. Is that right? And the first event for 2021. So,
yes.
Well done, Mr. Before I begin, I'd like to welcome our guest speakers tonight. Carmen Besselich, Dr. Lehan Stammen, Michael Tapp, and Mark Stone. And we have the privilege of them being able to share some of their knowledge, expertise with us tonight. So thank you very much for that. Tonight's Tech Talk, with the focus on data, knowledge and insights, is of particular significance to Techtorium. Techtorium, for those of you who aren't aware, is a Category 1 provider, and we specialise in delivering IT education, and only IT education. Our philosophy since 2004 has been to create IT professionals through excellence in education, and I think that's something that we live by every day. Although our philosophy has remained the same, we're continually innovating and changing to meet the changing demands of the industry as well. From what I can see, the New Zealand industry is experiencing a digital uprise, and the IT industry is one of New Zealand's fastest growing sectors, so we're in the right position. For Techtorium, our purpose is being able to enhance the lives of our learners, to guide their careers and to ensure they learn real-world skills that are in demand from a lot of our industry partners. We continually have our finger on the pulse. It's really important. Adapting our course content to reflect real life. And as a small provider, we're able to respond quickly to the changing needs of the industry. Becoming a data-driven is critical to the success of Techtorium and to our learners. Yes. Good quality information not only supports strategic decision making, but it allows us to prove our value to our stakeholders, the economy and the community. For Techtorium, good quality data allows us to improve our business processes, be more targeted in our marketing campaigns, and it even reduces budget expenditure, which is great for me. But ultimately it helps us understand the needs of our learners, and it guides the recruitment of learners that are truly passionate in IT. Before I close off, I'd like to thank Masood for allowing us to host tonight's event, and obviously Collar for the time you've taken to invest in Techtorium. You've always been a firm believer of what we do, and I appreciate it very much. I look forward to meeting up with you after the event tonight and getting to know you all. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Cool. All right, so we're going to do our first pair share tonight. I wonder if I could get you to take a look around and find someone you don't know. Actually, why don't you rise up and very quickly go and have a quick conversation with the person you don't know tonight. Introduce yourself and tell them why you're here. Yeah, switch over now, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, cool.
Awesome. Is she there? I've set up Lehan to to take over as the first speaker if needed.
So the first speaker is going to be someone here, and then the second is going to be...
It can be... Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, just if you haven't got a...
She should be good. She should be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Edge, yeah, that's working.
So I've got 2 mics on me now. Which one?
That is... It's not my... I don't know, because I haven't been asked to do it. That's the other guy in the white shirt.
Okay.
But yeah, I would help you if I could.
No worries.
It seems like it's working as it stands, so...
okay.
Yeah.
I think Masood wanted me to give it to a speaker, so that's all right. I'll handle that.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Okay. Next time if we have a distance guest, like give me a communication channel with them, like their team, so I can tell them when to start instead of using the chat. But that's a small thing.
Is she available?
Yes, she's here.
Okay, can you put her there as well?
No questions.
She not seen us, is it?
No, she can see us. Yep, because I've got mine.
Can she see the audiences?
Yes, she should be able to through mine.
So,
through my computer.
but your computer, where's your computer?
It's at the other end.
Is that Carmen?
Pop it here?
Yeah, because she needs to see the audiences
Okay.
from their face.
Right. I'll be back very shortly.
Yeah, I guess you can introduce.
Hi, Carmen.
Hello.
How are you?
We can.
Oh, we can't hear you. We'll get our sound guy to connect it up.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Okay. Outstanding. Sure. Yeah.
Pop it up.
Yeah. Go ahead.
When she talked to one from
How are we doing?
You should turn off this one. Everyone at YouTube hear us.
Okay.
This one.
Do you want to take it? Do you want to take it? There you go.
Should be coming through. To try? Yeah. Hey, Carmen. Hey, Carmen, could you hear us? See if I can hear you.
What's your name? Carmen.
Carmen, but we cannot hear her.
Is she trying to talk?
Yeah, I guess if the people are silent, then we can.
Yeah, and just make sure that the other can.
We will introduce you soon, and then you can start your presentation. Where is the sound system?
It's not coming out here. It's coming out here.
Could you put it next to that? Next to that, then everyone on YouTube can hear.
Oh yeah.
So something I forgot to mention before,
is that the TechTalk team are taking the whole formula to a whole new level in 2021. They've partnered up with IMS Projects, and they've formed a series of workshops that precede each of the Tech Talks. So we've got this networking thing that happens now, and earlier today, they had an amazing 2-hour workshop that takes a look into Industry 4.0 principles. Hands up who's heard about that? It's called Tech Plus. There's a couple in the room. Yeah, just highly encourage you to, if you're curious about it and want a little bit of a taster and a tour guide to get into some of these topics, please give the team a call and look out for it. We're announcing it on our promotions when we have the networking event. It's usually preceded by a workshop. Is that right? Yeah. Sweet. So that's Tech Plus. Cool. How are we doing, Ben?
All right, we should be nearly ready.
Ben is the man. All right, that's enough time for me to do a long and drawn out introduction. Awesome. So we're going to get to our first speaker tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Carmen Besselich is an amazing, amazing person. She's an entrepreneurial powerhouse, passionate about leveraging data and technology to generate impact and transformation. That's kind of, it really is that grand, for those of you who might know her. So in record time, she has built 2 multi-million-dollar industry-leading businesses that do just that. So the first one is Velocity. Anyone heard of Velocity? Give me nice big nods. Yeah. Cool. So they make property buying easier and faster and more transparent for all the parties. They deliver huge efficiencies to the estimated $2 trillion New Zealand property market. A true Kiwi success story. Velocity has been recognized globally, including the prestigious India FinTech Awards in 2019, FinTech Startup of the Year, and Singapore Top 10 Global FinTech in 2018. A pretty remarkable achievement. Her other company, I hope she's listening to me. Are you listening? Not if you can. Hear me? But I'm getting it in text. There's a lag. So the second company was Data Insight. So Data Insight helps New Zealand's largest businesses and government organisations leverage the power of data and advanced analytics, enabling data-driven decision-making to improve customer experience, efficiency and profitability. Outside of founding 2 data technology businesses, Carmen mentors several students and business founders as a regular speaker, sharing her innovation success story, and serves on several boards, including UNICEF, and as a proud mother of 4 children. Carmen will be joining us live stream tonight, as you know. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Carmen.
Hi everybody. I'm sorry I can't be there in this COVID world. I have a couple of sick children and a sick husband, so I thought I'd better stay away. I hope I'm only echoing for me and not you. So, yeah, what an exciting topic and a very broad topic that you've given me, talking about data and insight. And I really wanted to bring it down to why we talk about these things, which is very much how do we deliver in the age of the customer, and why is it important to actually be worrying about Industry 4.0 and what does this actually mean for us? I think we all recognize we're living in an incredible world of change. And certainly it's never been more change than in the past year. For many of us, it was almost a year that we went into our first lockdown 2 days ago, last year, 2020. And some of the key drivers of this change, many of you will be hearing about. Am I echoing for all of you or just for myself?
No, Carmen, you're coming through loud and clear and, for us.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, I'll just hear myself echo, which is quite traumatic. So the key drivers of change are very much the increase in digital connectivity. You're listening to me now from my home in Waimaku on country Wi-Fi, more and more data, cloud storage and technology, which I'm sure all of you in the room recognize. And one of the biggest changes that's driving the need for more data and more technology and knowledge and insights is us as humans and as people, and our expectations as customers. And so, so we very much live in the age of the customer, where we expect businesses to know us, we expect them to value us and deliver relevance, and we expect them to make our lives easy. And when they don't do this, we can actually get quite cross, and it's very much only possible with data and technology. And so obviously we're all aware of the most valuable brands in the world and how they leverage data, like Amazon and Uber. But many of those examples can be small ways that they show us through data and technology that they know us and reward us for their business. But it's very much only possible with data and technology. And, I am obviously very biased in having built 2 data and technology businesses, but they are the most valuable businesses in the world. So when we talk about customer centricity and the need to leverage technology and data for people, this is what we mean. And it's very much about understanding how we use it to add value, regardless of our business, whether manufacturing, operational, government, or personal. And so it's very much the key to creating value and growth. So thank you for the introduction. As I say, I've got 2 businesses that do just this, and it's all been about taking data and turning it into knowledge and insights. And data insight works with anyone that has lots and lots of data, and Velocity very much takes data, and importantly property data, and puts it in the hand of the property ecosystem to make really important decisions through technology. And so I guess in terms of tonight, it's very much the opportunities around what are the lessons for execution, because we all know technology and data is the way of the future, and that it's certainly the way to build businesses and value for people. But I thought I would share what are the sort of life and entrepreneurial lessons that I've gained in executing in data and technology, because every business that we work with, they know they need to innovate. Everybody knows technology is important and data is important. But how do we actually execute on this and really leverage it to create value? The first and most important thing is the why, and it's really about assembling the right people and the right purpose. And when I talk about the right people, it's not only your own team, but also externally, to understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve with the technology and the data, and how do you actually understand that better than ever before and solve it better than ever before. So very much our success has been focusing on our why. Which sounds, that very much you would think I was going to start with the technology or the data. But first you need to know, why are you doing what you're doing? What is the problem that you're solving, and why are you so passionate about solving it? Because when you approach it from that perspective, if you're working in technology and data, anything is possible. If you hire the right people, and you have that creative thinking combined with the technical thinking, then you can really achieve and solve any problem that's out there. And so certainly the secret to our success, or the pathway to our success in both businesses, has very much been in our culture and our customer obsession of making it a better user journey, particularly for people when they're buying a home. It's such an emotive process. Why can't we make that better and faster? And it shouldn't be the way it's always been done. Our passion for transformation, when we were working in India, when we were even working to build our first automated valuation model for property in New Zealand and get chief risk analytics officers and banks to accept it, it was very much actually having that passion for transformation to deliver. And an agile mindset is so important, because you're constantly approaching new problems that you really need to work through, as well as new opportunities. And so mindset and culture is absolutely everything. So it is all about people in your own team, and also who you're working with. Then we all know there's more and more data, and data insights started because lots of businesses that we worked with said we have lots and lots of data, but no insights. And very much it's not just about data for data's sake, but about the so what. And this has been such a fundamental thing for all the clients that we work with. How do they make data-driven decision-making? And even on the boards, the charity board, you touched on my introduction that I'm working with UNICEF. Even at UNICEF, we have to make data-driven decisions to know what's the right thing to do to actually make the most difference and the most impact with the resources that we have available. And we saw this very much last year with COVID. Everybody talks every day, how many cases. And so actually everyone's looking at data everywhere. Suddenly, all of a sudden, it's becoming more aware. And actually, I know many of us probably have frustrations that people aren't making data-driven decisions in some of the decisions being made around that. What we have to recognise is that we're only going to have more and more data. And it's really not just about having data. And lots of businesses we work with have got lots of data and they think that's their asset. Unless you actually use the data and use it to predict, leverage, and execute on it, then you're not creating any value. So data is, I'm not even going to say data's like oil, but if oil's in the ground and no one turns it into petrol, it has no value if it's buried under your house somewhere. It really has to be about how do you actually turn it into something valuable, and something that can be creating data-driven decisions. It's important for us to recognize that most of the things that we've been taught are for a world that no longer exists. And I love the introduction before when Colart was talking about our children and the world they're going to live in. Actually, everybody needs to understand data. And it's quite exciting for me because I was in data long before it became cool. But really, we all need to be left brain, right brain thinkers in this new world. We need to be left, right brain thinkers to understand the human and the people perspective around the problem that we're solving and what is the impact that we're going to have with whatever we're creating or developing. And we need to have the left brain thinking to be able to understand how do we execute in the technology and in the data. And it's really important that we bring both of those views and all of those views together to achieve success. If we have technology and data without a people or human-centered design focus, obviously it can do all sorts of things that we might not want it to do. And there's many examples of that. And so that's the fundamental thing to recognize. Understand where's your sweet spot personally or for your business and for your leadership team, and where do you have those gaps. And one of the examples is very much Cambridge Analytica and the Facebook debacle. I'm sure that Facebook didn't purposely decide to make their data available for it to be used in that fashion, but somebody, without thinking about the people focus, found a way to do that. And so And we had to then pivot and actually recognize what were the needs of our customers and connect the valuer to the property occupier through an app to take photos and geocode and timestamp and capture data so that valuations could continue. And so continuous innovation is really driven through, for us, collaboration to understand having that agile mindset that I touched on, and understanding when do we need to move and when do we actually need to go at speed even more so, but never being complacent. And so, everything that we're going to talk about in Industry 4.0, I'm sure with all your ongoing series, is that speed is everything. You just do not have the luxury of waiting. And I think in the current environment where we're seeing, certainly over the past year, the reactions of some companies and businesses and government even of hibernation versus innovation, the gap between those that are executing and embracing digital technology is certainly going to be bigger when we do come out of this craziness versus those that have really innovated and had speed, because change is happening now. It's happening all around us. It's happening really quickly. And we will liken it to the frog in the boiling water, where the frog can jump out of the pot at any time, but he doesn't realize it's getting hotter and hotter. And I can't see you all while I'm doing the PowerPoint, but I'm sure you all have your phones close to you. We're all digitally connected. There's only going to be more data. We're only going to continue to develop our lives. And when we see the digital shopping, the remote working over the last year, everything has accelerated even faster than ever before. So I talk very fast and get excited, and I wanted to leave some time for questions. But really, for us, the top lessons have been that people are the path to execution, to leverage data and actionable insight. So not just data for data's sake, actually telling the story and answering the so what, and thinking agilely even about data. Harnessing technology and partnering where you need to. That's really important. In technology, you just cannot do everything, and you never should try to. And I think that this is a really important lesson as well, particularly in technology. There's so many ways to connect into different ecosystems and platforms and APIs. So really focus on where you want to win, and in terms of technology, in terms of delivering for whatever problem that you're solving, and think about how do you partner to make that a better value proposition. One of the best examples I saw around that was Grab in Singapore, is competing with Uber, and the founder of Grab was on stage, which was incredible. I was speaking there as well, Money 2020, and I couldn't believe they just got the founder. And he said, they said, actually, we recognised last year our drivers also need insurance. So we partnered with insurer. Now we have this many millions of insurance clients. And then we recognised our drivers might need small loans. So we partnered with this bank. And now we've got X many million bank accounts leveraging loans through our platform. And basically what they're doing is thinking, what are all the other things that we can partner and we can connect digitally to deliver a better outcome for their customers. And that's why they've scaled so much, and they're really thinking outside in and leveraging technology and data to deliver those seamless experiences that are absolute game changers. The trust and transparency can't be forgotten. And I think, the most important thing for us is also never stop starting. So I talk very fast, and I'm going to just stop presenting there and talk to a couple of examples, if you can see me now, of how that all comes together. And I think, it's really considering how do you bring them all together and deliver to the customer's needs. And, one of those examples is Uber. Obviously, I'm quite happy for Uber to know where I am. They can't send the car if I don't share my geolocation with them. But if I'm walking past McDonald's and suddenly Uber says, hey, want to buy a cheeseburger, I'd be going, whoa, that's not what I signed up for. So it's thinking about technology and thinking about data and the human experiences in a transparent way, that you're building trust and that you're allowing them to the customer to actually decide how they want to use them. And I think that's really, really important, thinking about people first and then leveraging technology and data to deliver those seamless experiences. So I know I talk really fast, and they did say leave some time for questions.
Awesome, thank you so much, Carmen. So we've got time to take a couple of questions. Is anyone sort of intrigued or inspired or curious about something that you've heard so far? If not, I've got one. Should I go first? And Marissa's got a nice formula there, gut and then data, and then go back to your gut. What's your take on that?
Very much about being agile, and speed is everything. I'll never forget, we were working with the telco, and their competitor did an offer that morning, and they literally said they needed a segmentation model by that afternoon. And the team was panicking, going, well, you can't do that. You can't do a segmentation model in 4 hours. And the telco said, well, if you don't, we're just going to do a blanket offer to everybody, and rather than not communicate to them. And so it was really, well, what can we do? And we can certainly do a light touch segmentation model and then learn from that and evolve from that. And that was a really great lesson for the team, to go that done is better than none. And, it depends on what you're in, obviously. We can't try that same methodology when we're building an automated valuation model for a lender who's lending billions of dollars through our platform on property. That has to be pretty accurate. And so it's the good old get it basic and just test and learn. So particularly with data, I think it's thinking about how do you get the best, fastest result if speed is what you're after. And there's many examples of that. For example, the Lemonade insurance claim, where they did that answer within 2 minutes. Can they do that for every single insurance claim? Certainly not. But they certainly made a lot of headlines out of that example. And so I do think gut is so important. The gut, when you're going to an unknown destination, your gut, you don't know where you're going, and you're going to try different paths to get up to the top of the mountain. So your gut's going to give you the first one to try, but then the data should guide you when you're going the wrong way.
Kia ora. Wow, great, thank you. We've got a question here.
So you mentioned about...
Can you hear David all right there?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Yes.
So you mentioned about data's key and have actionable data. Filtering that actionable data and recognising it even in the first place. Was that where your gut feel would also come into?
Yeah, I think it's really saying, why are you doing this? What is the question that you're wanting to answer? And it's not just data for data's sake. And if you get the answer, what are you going to do with that information? And that's where it's actionable insights to say, what's it important to know and what are the important things to measure? Because every business needs to measure what matters. And if you are making decisions without measuring what matters, then you just can't make those decisions. So, for example, we were talking about when we went into lockdown, do we furlough the door-to-door team in this charity example, or do we move them to the call centre, or do we actually do we carry on? Are we ever going to do door knocking again? And I asked the question: how much does door knocking donor charity actually make versus phones? Is it in decline, or is it actually even a thing? And nobody knew the answer. And so I guess it's really saying, what are the important things that you need to be measuring? And if you do measure them, then how can you make those insights actionable? Because otherwise, we're just going to have more and more data. So your gut can tell you what do you think will matter, and quite often then the data will tell you whether you're right or wrong.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I think that's all we've got time for. Carmen, thank you so much for connecting us with us tonight. If the team has any more questions, are we okay to just forward them to you, or put links to the event?
Yes, link it or forward to me is great. Thanks everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Sorry I couldn't be there in person.
Thank you. Oh, and in the spirit of data, I've been given some data tonight. about the registrations. So I've been told that 30 of you amazing people have registered. So thank you very much. Out of 66. Can you give them a round of applause, please? Slow clap. So if you haven't registered, please can I encourage you to grab your phone, grab one of those QR codes, and just follow through. About 6 questions or so. You can wait for the break if you like, but we would love to hear from you and connect with you tonight. Cool. All right. So next up, we have got the amazing Dr. Leon Stemmett. We have a bit of shared history.
We do.
As it turns out. Pinballing around sub-Saharan Africa back in the day. But I'm very pleased to introduce Leon tonight. He's a resilience, stress, and leadership expert. I'm really keen to hear about this. He is diversely qualified and holds degrees in biochemistry, microbiology, you didn't mention, organizational psychology and experimental psychology. You were doing that on me. You were like working really
I was
the whole
sorting
time. That's why I'm confident, I'm resilient, I'm dealing with the stress right now. Thanks, man.
Sweet. Free of charge.
He has an affinity for multidisciplinary applied research. For over 20 years, Lehan has studied stress and resilience and continues to share the findings and insights with several audiences with the aim of supporting everyday people on their journey to better deal with stress and to be more resilient in life. Hands up who thinks that's important. Should see all the hands. Awesome, thank you. He has had several senior leadership and management roles in a variety of industries and is currently also involved in research projects involving virtual reality, behaviour change and mental health in collaboration with a number of technology and health science researchers from various universities in New Zealand and internationally. Every year he speaks to thousands of people ranging from scientists, academics, medical professionals to senior leaders in business as well as schools and community groups. He also supervises doctoral and master's degree research projects across a range of discipline areas. Leon is currently the president of the Auckland Institute of Studies and the director of DWI Limited, a company that specialises in personal and organisational development. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Leon.
Thank you.
The stage is yours.
Stage is mine.
The stage is yours.
It's very good. It's nice to hear a South African do an introduction in Maori, by the way. I mean, the accent's quite similar, actually.
Dr. Leon, may I request that we stay on this side?
On this side of the screen?
Yeah, I think for the camera and the sound.
All right, cool. No worries at all.
Thank you, my friend.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here. I think, and Masood, thank you very much. I was looking for you over there, but you're sitting right next to me.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. I think Masood's been asking for a couple of times to come, and
exactly.
now I made time, so it's good to be here and to share with you. And I'm very pleased also with what Carmen said. I think a lot of what Carmen said is links very closely to what I have to say as well. So you've already heard I'm a stress researcher. I've been interested in stress for many, many years. The main reason is not so much the stress. The main reason is I'm interested in seeing people be successful. And the main thing that stands in people's way is stress. So you might think to yourself, well, what is a stress researcher going to talk about technology and somebody who's in leadership? What am I talk about in terms of technology? The fact is I see a lot of what I do and how that impacts, how it's impacted by technology, but also how it impacts on technology. And I also see in my leadership roles, I see a lot of people spend an awful lot of time gathering data in order to think about the data, in order to make decisions about the data instead of just making decisions about the data. So a lot of what Carmen said is actually very true for what I see in industries and the businesses that I talk to and deal with. And so the companies I deal with are quite, they're very diverse. They range from people who work in prisons to people who work in corporates to people who work in universities. And everywhere, I see exactly the same pattern. People who spend an extraordinary amount of time trying to find information instead of thinking about the information. So, in line with that, what I want to talk to you about is data and then obviously knowledge. And then how do we get insights from that? And how does our brain, which is the hardware and the software that I'm really interested in, that's my software and my hardware, how does our brain respond to information and how does it process information, especially if there is a lot of pressure on people as well? So can I ask a quick question? Who here has experienced stress in the last sort of year? Okay. How many of you think that you can think when you're stressed? How many of you think that you can think properly when you're stressed? All right. The rest of you aren't thinking then. Because when we're stressed, our brain shuts down. So your brain literally shuts down. So you think with the frontal lobes and the emotional centers of your brain sort of sitting here in the middle. And when those emotional centers in your brain are activated because of stress, your brain shuts down, it stops thinking. And obviously stress has all sorts of other impacts on us as well. So for example, it slows down our immune system. So our immune system isn't doing so well when there's a lot of stress. But knowing that is what I want to bring across to you. So what do we do with the technology that we've got? If we're going to say that Industry 4.0 is taking place, it's a trend. And I don't know if you know what the trend is. The definition of a trend is something that's going to happen whether we're a part of it or not. So could I ask you one more question? There will be more questions. I'm going to ask you one more question. So if I say to you, in the 1980s, for those of you who were alive in the 1980s, in the 1980s, how many of you had a car phone? A car phone, no, what? A car phone, an actual car phone, if you know, back in the days. So you had a car phone. Anybody else had a car phone? No. So in the 1980s, you thought to yourself, well, I've got a phone at home, I've got an answering machine at home, and I've got a phone at work, and if people want to get a hold of me, they can get a hold of me over there. Why would I need something in the car? How many of you now have a mobile phone?
Or who hasn't?
Yeah, it's all changed. That's changed very few years after the 1980s when we had mobile phones. I think I had my first mobile brick, I think, actually, and in 1995, I think, around that side. So it's a trend. It's an example of a trend. It's something that's going to happen whether you are a part of it or not. So Industry 4.0 is not going to happen, it's happening. It is absolutely happening, right? You all know that. So the question I have is, we now have 21st century technology. We still have 19th to 20th century management models, and we've got 18th century governance models, for those of you who know about it. But we've got a first century brain. If you don't believe what I say, I have, in last week, had to physically print out a form, sign the form, and deliver it physically to somebody because of governance, not because of management. It was a governance rule that we need to just physically sign something. So the fact of the matter is, we are still working with 21st century technology, 19th to 20th century management models to accommodate the gap between 18th century governance and 21st century technology. So that's what we're currently doing. So those of you who are in management or leadership roles, you probably find yourself spending quite a lot of time over here trying to manage these bits and pieces and to bring those two together. Yeah, we call it bureaucracy, we call it compliance, we call it rules, we call it regulations, and the funny thing is somebody came up with those rules, which means somebody can probably change those rules. But until then, we're stuck with this. So the brain hasn't changed over all these years. And so all of the technology that we have is here to support our thinking. That's what technology is supposed to do. It's supposed to support us. So all systems, technology, policies, and procedures, they're designed for us, really. And I think Carmen said exactly the same thing, and I absolutely agree with this. And then I've got another question. So how many of you have ever seen technology design itself, implement itself, manage itself, support itself? Have you seen that? No, we do it.
General AI.
General AI. But somebody looks after the AI as well, doesn't it? Somebody needs to design the AI. There needs to be a principle behind the AI. In some way, shape, or form, we are involved in that. Second thing is, if the AI is there, what's the purpose of the AI if it's not about us in the first place? Human beings by nature are egocentric. That's what we do. We won't design something unless it's for us, right? We won't design technology for its own sake. So, I, for very long, have used this. It's sort of my mantra in management. Systems make things work, but people make things happen. Yeah, and I love thinking about it like that. So the point being is we can have policies, procedures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And whenever I read a company in a newspaper say, somebody shouldn't be worried about what we've done because we have a good system, I go, sure. Systems without people don't happen. You know, systems need people. So when we talk about change and what we're seeing with Industry 2.0, there are two. So if you've studied change or management, there are two systems that are operating. One is called the legitimate system, and the other one is called the shadow system. You need both systems in an organization. The shadow system is the part where things change, right? This is the thing that sort of happens under. It's a good system, but the people who are working in the legitimate system, which is all about rules, regulations, policies, procedures, do not like the shadow system. Those are the rules and the regulations. We need both systems. And often what we do is we gravitate towards one of them. So we either go, everything must change, or everything must be policies and procedures, right? We need both systems. And now the trouble is, when we have a tension between those systems, people start stressing. When people start stressing, it doesn't matter how much data we collect, it becomes absolutely useless. Absolutely useless. So, my question is always, do we need to improve all the technology, or do we need to improve it incrementally? And there's a little sentence up there that says, and you might have heard this sentence, it says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. How many of you have heard that sentence? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right, that's such a dangerous sentence. Because what if what isn't broken is irrelevant and you're not fixing it? It still is pointless.
It's broken.
It's broken. Is it? Some people who work with the 18th century governance don't think it's broken. They think it's still okay. It's just not relevant anymore. So I think the key thing for us is it relevant? That's the question. So before we even spend time fixing things in old infrastructure, I was in a building today, just out of interest, I was in a building today that was built in the 1960s. They still have the original piping inside the building for water. It is steel piping. I'm hearing that, right? That's kind of the sound we hear as well. Like steel. Yeah, so steel piping for water, built in the 1960s, there's a consequence, right? It's not broken yet, it's going to break, and it's completely irrelevant. So that's the question I ask. Now, Carmen asked similar questions. So what do we do with all of this data? Can we process all the data? And can we use all of the data as well? And that's what's interesting, because her whole business model is designed around what can we do with the data? Can we use the data? So this is a picture of a brain. Many of you might have seen this picture of the brain. The thing with the brain is the frontal lobe is where you think, and then you've got the emotional centers. Like I said to you, when the emotional center is activated, your brain stops thinking. So the question I always have is, if people are spending a lot of time trying to gather the data, and they're stressing about getting the data, what are we doing? You know, so for example, will managers be effective in making decisions if they're spending all their time trying to find the data? And even if they got the data, are they going to be effective in their decision making if the data isn't packaged in a way that makes any sense to them? And so the question that I think Carmen's asking is, how do we deal with that specific issue? Because this brain hasn't changed for centuries, and it's not going to change for another couple of centuries. That we know for a fact. That's your brain, that's my brain, that's all of our brains. So interestingly, what I have done, and I don't know if you can see that, but a couple of years ago, we looked at this problem long before we had all the data that we've got now. A former colleague of mine and I looked at this. He's a decision scientist, and I was looking into the neuroscience and stress. And we detected that there's this issue around all of this data coming in, and we saw that, well, there's a problem. So what are we going to do with it? So we basically developed this little model that says there's a business dimension, there's an information dimension, and there's the human dimension. And we categorized all of this. And I don't know if the slides will be available later on, but I'm happy to send this on to you. But the human dimension doesn't change. So what we need to do is we need to work within the information dimension and the business dimension, consequently, to see how can we take what we know and what we have and formulate that in a way and format that in a way to present it to people to make decisions, specifically when those perceived people are under pressure. Think about a pressure situation. Like, for example, I was in Christchurch on Wednesday. How many of you have been to Christchurch? So when you go to Christchurch, there's a lot of development going on. But there was a time about 10 years ago where it was chaos. And people needed to make decisions pretty fast. Right? So now they've got some infrastructure in place to make those decisions pretty fast. But that's the problem we identified, is how do you make those decisions very fast if there's vast amount of data coming in and your brain sticks, especially when there's chaos. Like in the Christchurch earthquakes. Now, I don't know if you can see, but if you had to come closer to this picture, all of this is made up of the word order. So the whole word chaos is made up of the words order. It's just pasted over and over and over again. So what we often do in research and science is we kind of take a broad picture and then we go deep and we try to find some kind of order or pattern within the chaos. But all we look at is that one piece in research. We just look at that one little piece. And then we look at another little piece, another little piece. And eventually we stand back again, we try to put them together. Now, when you have time, you've got the benefit. When you don't have time, you don't have that benefit. So the question I have is, how do we take data to form information, to gather knowledge, so that we can use our brain to get wisdom and to make decisions that's based on wisdom? Because what I see a lot of is a lot of people spend an awful lot of time gathering data or formatting in a way to form information or to gather some knowledge out of it, instead of using what this thing was made for. Our brain was not made necessarily to gather data. It was made to make informed decisions based on data. And I think if we can start using our brain for what it was designed to do, rather than thinking it's just this process that it takes in information. It is actually something we can use to think about stuff, to make wise decisions about stuff, to use our gut. So one of the challenges when people stress, and this is an interesting piece of research that's at the bottom if you want to go and have a look at it, is it was during the earthquakes in Christchurch. These psychologists, behavioral scientists, they looked at what happens when people experience an earthquake, a stressful event, in terms of the errors that they make. And this is important for us if we work in technology in order to think about how we put data together for people to be able to make informed decisions. So here's one of the things they discovered, is people make more errors of commission. Now, an error of commission is when you do the wrong thing when you shouldn't have done it. And an error of omission is when you don't do something when you should have done it. And they make more of those errors as well. So imagine, for example, people have all this data coming in, and they're under severe pressure to make things happen. And suddenly, they make a decision, and it's the wrong decision. It could have severe consequences. We're not, we might think about what am I going to eat tonight, and I'm so stressed about what I've got to eat tonight. But imagine you're the person who needs to make the decisions about the Christchurch earthquake. Imagine you're the person who needs to make the decision around all sorts of other big things, terrorist activities and so forth. So my field of research is all about what do people do in stressful situations. And what I see is people make a lot of these mistakes, an awful lot of these mistakes.
So what happens to my world,
Yep.
having all this data, the fact of having filters, ways of understanding what the data is, as well as prioritization that you've already done through some form of AI previously?
Question would be, do we trust that? Does the person who designed the data, the way it's captured, the prioritization, do they understand the decisions that we need to make? So quite often what I see is people come up with this database of stuff that they, or a dashboard, and they go, here's a dashboard. And I say to them, the first mistake you've made is you didn't ask me what I need in order to make a decision. So you've got to sort of back engineer it or reverse engineer it. What are the decisions I need to make? What data do I need for those information? And then how do you position those bits of information as well? And I think the worst thing, and I think Carmen mentioned it as well, is when we design that and we think that's the end of it, because these things keep changing so often. They keep on changing. Two common things that people then do is when information becomes too much for them is they start avoiding things, or they start, and instead of managing the risks, they start to avoid the risks. And that's not a good thing. Anybody in business knows that you have to absolutely take risks. Good luck doing anything without taking any risks. It just doesn't happen like that. And so I think one of the key things, 3 examples of how people make decisions then is they either have an organizing idea, or there's enough groupthink, or they use something called avoidance coping. So when we talk about organizing ideas, I'll give you one example of how a single organizing idea works. If you have a single organizing idea, then that is the decision, or that's a single idea that you use to make every single decision about your organization and yourself. And it could be quite dangerous. One example, very quickly, one example would be a ship called the SS Eisenhower. A couple of years after the Titanic sank, people realized that people drowned because there weren't enough lifeboats. The sea was created. Every ship must have a certain number of lifeboats. So all ships had to be fitted with a certain number of lifeboats. SS Eisenhower didn't even leave the harbor. It was never designed to have lifeboats and people, that many lifeboats and that many people. So it didn't even leave the docks, and it fell over, and over 800 people died, despite the lifeboats. So what I'm saying is, your single organizing idea might sound like a good idea, but it might not be a good idea, and it can have dire consequences as well. Groupthink, one example would be the Bay of Pigs Fiasco. You can go and read it up with Kennedy, President Kennedy, where they realized that people make the same decisions for all sorts of reasons. So they all want to make the same decision. Nobody talks about other alternatives. And it led to a very, very dangerous situation for the United States as well. So you can go and read up about the Bay of Pigs Fiasco. Last thing is avoidance coping. The Challenger disaster would be another example of that as well. If you go through the case study of the Challenger disaster, there was a lot of power play. And so under that whole stressful situation, people started saying, I don't want to put my hand up and say I've noticed a problem, because if I do that, there might be consequences for me personally. So avoidance coping is also not a useful way of dealing with the stress, but that's what people do because the information is just too much for them to manage. I'm not going to talk about that one. I think the main thing for us is then, in terms of designing the systems that we have, is to ask the right questions. Because if you ask a question, it changes how you think. So a different question gives you a different answer, which changes the way you think. Gives you a different emotion, and different emotion leads to a new behavior as well. So I think the key thing for us is to start asking different questions about the data. Instead of what is it that we want to design, we start asking different questions about that as well. And a comment that many of you might have heard in that same vein is people might say to you, are we on the same page? How many of you have heard that? Are we on the same page? Yeah, I cannot stand that question. Because my question is, are we on the right page? That for me is a far more important question. So I often do that in management meetings. People would say, are we on the same page? And I go, I don't know, what page are you on? Oh, you know, are you on the same page? Do you like my page? If I don't like your page, you don't like mine. We've got to find the page that is the right page for us to look at. Thank you very much for your time. We're not going to do questions now. I think we'll do questions afterwards, yeah? And I'm going to stick around. My time is up anyway. But I'm happy to answer any questions. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you as well. Thank you very much.
I've got heaps of questions, actually, now I can find you.
Wasn't I clear enough?
So we're gonna just kind of have a little energizer and a break. Yeah. Who's ready for a break? There's pizza still in the back. There's drinks. I'm just gonna get you to do a very quick exercise. All right, just to kind of liven it up a little bit. So before you run away, could I invite you all to rise up, stand up, and go find someone to partner with. And when you do that, you're going to pair up, and you's going to be a leader, and one of you is going to be a follower. All right, so introduce yourself. And I want you to share one thing you've learned, one thing you're going to follow up on. All right. So as the leader, you're going to share your thing. But while you're doing that, I want you to do a few funny gestures. All right. So we're going to see some good stuff tonight. The follower is going to be listening carefully, and they're going to have to mirror everything that they see. All right. So all of those funny gestures, I'm going to expect to see, like looking at the looking. Is that working? All right. And then you're going to swap her out. Go for it.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Card cannot be accessed. What's wrong with the card? It's not going well. Too many absolutely changes.
Is it just the SD card?
No, it was fine. Yeah, no. Sweet. Chuck it in your pocket. You're ready to go.
Cool.
Easy.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Looking forward to catching up with you. Mikey, you ready, buddy?
Yeah, hopefully. What's the deal with? So let's switch to the speaker notes up here.
I suspect that Masood's got your. Did you have presentation slide?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, he's going to switch it over
Okay.
at that moment.
Cool.
I've got to do a long and embarrassing introduction. But
That's fine. I'll go and sit down. Mike.
no worries. That's cool.
I'll switch to the-
All right, ladies
I'm
and
ready to go.
gentlemen. Bring it back in again. Woohoo! All right. Can we grab a seat? Thank you very much. Our third speaker for tonight is the amazing Michael Tapp. Hey? I'm going to give him the most embarrassing introduction tonight. He was modelling so nicely for us just now for the photography session.
Was I?
Smouldering good looks. Brought us in a tiger out. That's very good. I'm founder and director of SEMA. Completed his BCom and BSc at University of Auckland and recently completed a Masters of Commercialization and Entrepreneurship. Started a career developing and implementing an accounting solution before moving into consultancy. Performed various solution architecture roles before starting SEMA. Some business partners 9 years ago to fill a gap in the market, a specialist consultancy in the information systems architecture space. And Michael also spent the last 6 months acting as the head of architecture at Vodafone. Radical. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Michael.
Cool.
So, we got you all sorted. We got your clicker. Slides.
Mm-hmm.
It's Michael who?
That one.
I was.
There you go. Cool. Speaker notes.
Can I have you then, please?
While that's happening,
I can wing it if I
how's
need to,
going
but
for you, you having a good time?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yep. I got to meet new people.
You want to see this?
Is that working out well? Awesome. Have a little think about any feedback for the organisers. We're always keen to learn about what works and what doesn't work. As you can tell, the formula is still evolving. So any likes, things that you liked today that you think we should tell us about it, and any changes. We're very interested in anything that you might have sort of experienced tonight that you think, actually, if you switch that up, maybe less questions on the registration form might be one of them. So any hints and tips for us, we'd really appreciate hearing from that.
it's okay. I can wing it.
Okay, many thanks.
Right. So, Lehan was fantastic. So you're going to have to forgive me. He set the bar very high from a talking standpoint, and I also put some speaker notes on there so I kind of could sort of remember what I was going to talk about, but I can't see them, so I'll kind of wing it as I go along. So welcome. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to talk to you about information systems architecture. Now, architecture is a funny beast, and Igor knows what I'm talking about. You heard me talk before. Information systems architecture is a funny beast because anybody who's worked with an architect will tell you that they know a good architect when they see it, but nobody really knows what a good architect is a lot of the time. Like, if I talk to people and go, well, what makes a good architect? People will give you a different answer every single time. But first of all, I just want to check. When I talk about information systems architecture, does everybody know what I mean? Like, is there anybody in the audience? Like, feel free to put up your hand. If I go, information systems architecture, does everyone kind of have a sense of what an architect actually does? No, there's a few people shaking their heads. Okay, so let me explain. So an information systems architect, is usually the person that kind of understands how everything joins up from end to end in an organization where ICT systems are concerned. So it's the architect is the one that typically will understand the big picture, and it's the architect that is usually called into big change projects to be involved in change of systems, things that are going on, and usually the ones that are making the kind of the major decisions around technology, and being looked to help ensure that the most optimal decisions are being made when organizations are choosing their tech. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to talk about architecture in terms of trade-offs. Because in the ICT world, most things where you're making decisions are a trade-off from one thing to another. So from an architecture standpoint, I quite like that idea of thinking in terms of trade-offs. And in terms of what makes a good architect, there's kind of a spectrum of different things that and ways of comparing different positions that you can take on things. That's not a bad way to think about architecture. So without further ado, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the trade-off between abstraction and details. So when my business partners and I first started our company about 9 years ago, we did some work for an engineering company downtown, and we duly went in there and followed like architecture best practice. We collected lots of information. We gave them a beautiful roadmap at the end of that exercise, and they said they were happy with it. But I have to admit, when I look at it in hindsight now, I kind of wonder whether it was really as good as what we thought it was at the time. And the reason why is because actually we fell into the trap of spending, I think, far too much detail time trying to understand lots and lots of information and try to kind of collate it up into like this perfect mammoth document that no one ever reads. So anyone that's spent time with architects know that architects love to write big long documents a lot of the time, and then nobody reads them. So I guess there's always this balance that's going on between abstraction and details, and a good architect will try to find the right balance between those things, because ultimately, if the more abstract that you make things, the easier it is to kind of convey something to someone. But actually, the devil's in the detail a lot of the time as well. So trying to find a balance between those things is important. So that's topic number one. So this quote here, hopefully what you can tell that this one is about is related to idealism versus pragmatism. So I think if we were talking before, I think both Lehan and Carmen talked about the rate of change. I think everybody can agree that the rate of change has never been faster than what it is at the moment. And the problem with that from an architecture standpoint is that it tends to lead to this ruthless form of kind of pragmatism that takes place. And agile, I'm sure most of you would have heard of agile as a thing, kind of in terms of software development and the way that systems get implemented and so forth. Agile is like the ultimate kind of instrument for pragmatism. It's all about short-term, kind of get stuff across the line, make things happen. But from an architecture standpoint, that can be problematic, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that in the longer term that you're actually trying to make the right long-term decisions, not just lots of short-term things that can oftentimes be counteractive and put you in the wrong place in the longer term. The problem with idealists, the other side of the equation, is that architects can be known from time to time to be a bit idealistic. Software engineers, I tend to be the kind of the worst where that is concerned, because oftentimes I've been on the end of poor decisions, and they kind of want to create the perfect solution. And to be honest, there's no perfect solution. So I guess the trick from an architecture standpoint is to try to find that balance between idealism and pragmatism. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is risk, and essentially uncertainty versus certainty. Usually that topic is the domain of project managers in the world of kind of change in IT, is usually where people think about it. Or it might be the CIO or the CTO, but usually that's more of an operational kind of a context, right? So the CIO and the CTO will be reasonably obsessed with the risk associated with the infrastructure that's going on in their organization. but they'll often be divorced from the details of the kind of technology change. And that's where architects usually come into the picture, or should come into the picture. So a good architect is going to have a really good working knowledge of risk and how to deal with that in a technology context. So a good example of this is a couple of years ago, I did a piece of consulting work for a manufacturing company. And that manufacturing company had an ERP solution that was on some outdated hardware that needed to be replaced. And so we got called in by one of the directors on the board, and they were going, well, really, shouldn't we be thinking about the cloud? That, the IT manager wants us to just upgrade that hardware and kind of leave it where it is. So I came in and had a look at what they were doing. And what I did was I applied a framework called Open Fair. So Open Fair is a very structured way of thinking about risk. And essentially what it does is it gives you a framework to quantify things so that you can think about impact, you can think about the likelihood of things happening, you apply dollars to things, and then you can weigh things up and try to decide what the best approach is. And lo and behold, when I looked at the cost of what it was going to take for them to move to the cloud and to operate on the cloud and compare it to what if they upgraded their hardware locally, even though there were a bunch of risks with upgrading the hardware on the local side of things, it actually turned out to be a better option for them because the likelihood was quite low. The impact, even though they could be out for a day or two, but they could operate quite successfully without the ERP. And so ultimately it made more sense to stick with the hardware that was on site as opposed to moving to the cloud, which was kind of an unintuitive place to be because pretty much anything that you read these days goes move it to the cloud. So this one is about specialism versus generalism. So one of the things with architects is that oftentimes in organizations, architects are kind of seen as being the kind of expert in the room, the kind of smartest guy, that kind of understands how everything works and everything fits together. And there's a really, for architects, that is, it's a really comfortable place to be. And it's actually quite an important role for the architect to play from time to time. But I'm actually of the firm opinion that the best architects are actually generalists, not specialists. Because to do architecture well, you have to have a really broad view of technology. You can't just be this kind of specialist person that sits there and just like focuses on your one little area. A good architect is like taking into account a whole bunch of different things and trying to take a balanced view of the world. So I don't have a framework on this one to talk about in terms of how to strike the right balance between specialism versus generalism. The only thing I would say is that good architects will spend a lot of time learning and continuing to kind of upskill themselves and keeping their knowledge kind of up to date. So this is one of my favorite topics, is modeling, and so one of the things that I've talked about a couple of times in here, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, is kind of frameworks that you can use. And most frameworks are built around a model. And in the world of kind of information systems architecture, one of the things that architects love doing is building models of how everything fits together. Because the fact of the matter is that in most organizations, you have a very complex landscape of systems and lots of different things that you've got to take account of. So if you can build a model that is somewhat accurate, then you can kind of make sense of it. Now, most people, when they think of models in a sort of ICT architecture standpoint, think of the diagrams that are created. And the diagrams are a necessary output of what we create. But actually, a model is much deeper than that. A model is something that lets you work through a problem. The model is something that, if you do it well and you capture the information appropriately, can act as a knowledge base so that you can go back and understand the impact of change. So models are a really, really important tool from an architecture standpoint. But they can also be quite seductive. And what I mean by that is you can just keep on building out the model and trying to create the perfect model and trying to get that model like as perfect as possible so that it reflects like the real world. But as the statement up there, right, all models are wrong, but kind of some are useful. So when you hit that point where you've created a model that is so detailed that you are losing, you're not getting any value out of it anymore, that's definitely the time to stop. Now, if you're interested in the modeling side of things from an architecture standpoint, some of you might have heard of UML if you're in the software engineering kind of side of things. If you're more around business process and the business side of things, then you've got BPMN, which is like a business process modeling language. My favorite modeling tool, though, is or modeling language, is a tool called Archimate. Archimate is an enterprise architecture modeling language, and it basically lets you model everything from organizational strategy, so that all those questions around why, down into the technology, and also lets you link into things like projects, and even lets you model real-world things like resources and equipment and that kind of thing as well. So, there is one thing that I have a bit of a pet peeve about, and I'm just about at the end, and that is where it has to do with organizations that have a favorite kind of solution or a system, and then every answer becomes that system. And this is the worst problem that I see over and over again in different organizations. And again, it's one of those it's kind of a laziness thing. It's kind of it's just one of those things that happens, right? You get in something like a Salesforce.com. For those who know Salesforce.com, it's like this kind of Uber platform that does all these different things. You bring it in to solve a particular problem. You have a couple of people that become really expert in it, and then all of a sudden, Salesforce.com is the answer to every single problem in the organization, even when it is not actually the best, most effective answer for that problem. There may be a better solution out there for it. The way to get around that is to be aware of context, right? So if you haven't figured out that the point of this picture here is just that you don't understand the context that's ended up with that guy on his head over there. So context is key. Context is the critical thing when it comes to architecture, in fact. So all of those comparisons that I was making between things from abstraction to details and so forth, it's actually context that lets you set where you should be appropriately on those things. So there are a couple of frameworks again that can help you set your context correctly. One is this one here. Does anybody recognize this? Yeah. Yeah. So this is from I think he was a major in the US Army, and I'm trying to remember it. John Booth, wasn't it? John Boyd. He was a fighter pilot, and what he did was he came up with this framework, which is a very generalized kind of framework for kind of looking at a situation and then figuring out how to make a decision, essentially. So observe, orient, decide, act are the four key parts to it, and there's quite a lot more detail underneath it. It gets referred to as the OODA loop quite a lot, and it's well worth going and have a bit of a read about Wikipedia if you're interested. The other person, there's an enterprise architect. He's an English guy. I think he's in Australia at the moment, actually. A guy called Tom Graves, who's pretty well known in enterprise architecture circles. He has this this framework here, which was all about thinking in terms of what's simple, complicated, ambiguous, and kind of not known chaos. So it was quite interesting listening to Lihan before talking about chaos as well. Because the point of this framework is, and again, all his stuff is out on the web. It's easy to go and find. Basically, what he's saying is that when you reach the point of now, you need things to be simple. Otherwise, it's impossible to make a decision. The further out in the future, the more uncertain you are. And so things become not known, and they become kind of unknowable, really. And so depending on which way you're moving, depends on the type of the type of where you're at, I suppose, and the type of decision that you should be trying to make. So to finish, look at that, 38 seconds. These are the sort of the kind of topics that I've talked about all the way through, and really the point is that there is no one right answer. it's always about context, and context is the thing that will help you figure out whether you should be at the abstraction end or whether you should be at the details end of the equation. And really, from an architecture standpoint, for me, those are the key kind of things that if you take away all of the things around the technical things that architects know, those types of that type of thinking about those types of things is really what makes a really good architect, as opposed to someone who just knows lots of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Wow.
Right.
Do we have time for one or two questions?
Sure.
Who's first?
I don't know. I'm not from your field, but I've come across architects who always tell me it can't be done. Is it because, and then when you want to try to experiment, a lot of times you come across situations where you have to go away from the architects, do your experimentations, prove the concept, and come back to them, and they tell you why it can't be done again. So, how do you experiment with architects? How do you kind of fit into their world? Say they let you in and come and experiment.
Oh, look, architects like things to be linked to strategy. They like to think in the kind of long term and so forth. So I think the way to address it with an architect, I would have said, is to kind of go, look, we're going to try this thing, and ultimately it's going to link up with the strategy, or try to take it out of this kind of you're breaking the architecture to we're doing this thing over to the side, and eventually it's going to join up with the architecture. A good architect will recognize that actually nothing ever stays the same forever, and that actually there's a place for experimentation, there's a place for doing, right? Even though, I was a bit critical of Agile there, actually my criticism of Agile is really when it is kind of overused and it becomes the answer to every single question, which is a bit like the system, the Salesforce.com, right? Like it becomes a kind of an intellectual laziness thing. It's like, here's this thing, we're going to use it for every single problem that we've got, as opposed to thinking about the problem and trying to solve it appropriately. So I think it should apply in the same way for what you were talking about as well.
Finding the balance, eh?
Yeah.
And when you've got a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And my favourite, and I think it's what you're saying about Agile, is that knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to use it in a fruit salad. So like striking the balance and context matters. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
It's great in the fruit.
I'm actually willing to confront that assumption. But willing to experiment. All right. Thank you very much, my friend.
Cool.
I think that's it. Right, we have our final speaker for tonight. We're nearly there. 8:10, can you believe it? Just on time. It's a comforting sound in the background.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so ladies and gents, we're going to put our hands together in a minute for Mark Singh. Mark is the CEO of Procura. He loves challenging status quo. Is currently focused on identifying, adopting, and scaling proven digital Industry 4.0 innovations to drive intelligent supply chains. Mark is highly experienced and sought after in manufacturing and supply chain, and he has significant international exposure. He has over 25 years of successful accomplishments and demonstrated leadership on complex global transformation programs. Mark is skilled in leading organizational change and turnaround with the ability to connect with all layers of global organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mark. Thank you, my friend.
Pleasure.
So we've got your clicker here, and are your slides switched over? I'm glad you're touching it. I'm not touching it. There you go.
Yeah? Yes. All right. You can make it full screen from here. Yeah, just a bit.
We're going to have to come up with more comedy fillers. Anyone got any dad jokes? Ready to go?
I've got a dad job.
Igor, the floor is yours. 30 seconds.
I've had my kids challenged me to get some funny dad jokes.
Yes.
So I googled a website called Dad Jokes That Actually Funny, and started telling them to my daughter, who was laughing her head off. Then my son turns up and starts telling the same jokes. Turns out we're looking at the same website.
Is that the joke, or are you going to give us an example? Thanks, buddy. That's about as dad as it gets. That's meta dad. Where's our architect? That's meta. Awesome. Thank you for that. And the floor is yours, my friend.
Good evening. I hope everybody can hear me.
Good evening.
I think we've had some great sessions and insights around data, around architecture, around what we can do with data. I think in this session, what you see on the slide, in supply chains. I mean, supply chain always has been the poorest cousin of data, as I call. We all possibly believe in doing stuff: shop floor, factory, warehouse, port, transport. It's all about doing. And then I've spent around 25 years working what I call on the periphery of doing, in terms of making things better in supply chain, in terms of processes, in terms of systems, in terms of change, in terms of technology sometimes. And the experience has been that in the last 5 years, whatever we are experiencing in the supply chain space, from people recognizing that there is something called data, that's a big win. People are looking at data now and understanding, okay, there is something called data which we need to start recognizing. And then comes Industry 4, which is now talking about, at a very basic level, Industry 4 is about what we call cyber-physical systems. You're connecting physical systems with technology and then trying to make sense out of it. So in that context, I've had an interesting 2.5 years delving into this space, and what I will possibly talk you through today is how we can make supply chains effective. How can we can make supply chain become a competitive advantage and not just a cost, or not just a means of moving things from one place to the other, or producing some stuff which the marketers want to sell, and drive some competitiveness. So the interesting thing which the other side of the organization's finance or marketing has taught us is that there is always value in data. But in supply chain, we are beginning to realize that data can make dollars. Data can make a difference. And that's something which is coming to the fore more so over the last year or so, where we have seen certain kind of things happening, where at least everybody now realizes or understands that there is a need to look at data. There is a need to look at what data can do in terms of competitive advantage. And I think what I'll do is I'll start with an event which we all are familiar with. You all familiar with this one? Yeah? A big supply chain disaster, right? So this is an event which has happened. We all know about it. Now, the interesting thing in today's time is that there's a lot of data which is available about this event. What you see here on the screen is a screenshot from a website called Marine Traffic, where you can see all the ships which are piled up around. So we all know, okay, where my product is. I can go and zoom in on what's happening with it. And then we have a company in New Zealand which has a ship which is stuck right in the middle there, which has a $250,000 of chilled perishables in that. Yeah. And obviously, you know what's happening with your ship. This is a screenshot which has been taken possibly a year back, a day ago. So I exactly know what's happening with it. And I know what's going to happen with it, where it is going to move, how much time it is going to be stuck, and so on. But there's perishables inside, and I want to know what's happening with the product. There's $250,000 worth of perishables inside. What's happening with it? Because it needs to get to Europe at a particular time where it can be put on the shelf and then can be sold. So I need to answer a few questions. Okay, how much delay would there be? What kind of predictive ETA it has? What is the condition, because it's a perishable product? And then, since there'll be a delay, what's the impact on my supply chain in terms of making the next lot which has to be supplied, and the impact on the factory, and in terms of buying the raw material, and so on and so forth. Now, if we have to answer all those questions out of the data which is currently available, which is, I have some data, I have an event which has happened, I have some data, I have some signals, but from there, I can't get any actionable insights to answer those questions, which is what a supply chain manager would want to answer. I want to tell the customer when will you get your product. I need to know whether my product is intact or safe. I need to know what's that which I need to do differently now, given that the ship is stuck. All that answers I cannot get out of the data which is available to me from available systems which are around me. And hence, I cannot take the decisions which are based on data. And hence, that's how the supply chain has been over the years. I use my intuition, I make a few phone calls, I go back and look at certain kind of anecdotal experience which I have had, and take a few decisions. That's the way things have been going on. And then I go back and understand that because of this kind of a situation which I have encountered as a supply chain professional over the years, I normally don't go and look at the data which comes from my existing system, from the ERP systems, from the transport systems, from the warehouse systems, maybe from my 3PL systems, and so on. It's something which just gives me a post-mortem of what has happened, but doesn't give me much about, okay, what do I need to do for fixing things which are going to happen in future, or which I have currently on hand. And then we start looking at what's happening now out of all the data which has been created. Obviously, if we go and look across the universe, the companies which are leveraging this capability or this category of competitive advantage is still at an initial stage. And we have to ask the question, where is the gap? Where we have to do things differently. And we'll go back to this particular example, what I just shared with you, of where the gap is and what we need to do differently. So with this particular case, and this is a real life case which I'm talking to you about, which is happening as we talk, that there is a real-time visibility capability which is there in that particular container, which is exactly telling what's happening with my shipment, when it left the port, where it is at the moment. I can exactly see what the condition of my shipment is. So I know it's a perishable, it has to be maintained at a particular temperature. I get that visibility in real time. I know the tolerances which I have set, and if something is going wrong, I would know about it. And I get all these insights in real time about my shipment. So now, where's the difference? The difference is that I'm now investing in a capability which can allow real-time ability to acquire data. And that's, I think, an important aspect which is now being recognized and realized by the domains in supply chain, where the need for acquiring data in real time and then overlaying it with existing data which we have to derive insights. Because most of the time in the supply chain space, the data availability has been stuff which has happened in the past. So as I say, that real-time data acquisitions is the missing link, which this example tells you about. And what I will very quickly take you through now, which is a little bit of an abstraction here, that with real-time data which you acquire, and now with the connectivity which is available, you can now take that data to the cloud. You can process that data through the capabilities, through the algorithms which are available, and start getting insights, and you can start driving certain kind of automation through that, which can then drive certain effective outcomes which you would want to achieve. So that's where the acquisition process can start driving performance improvement in your supply chain. And this kind of a capability can then be overlaid with your other strategic initiatives around being agile, being adaptive, being resilient, and start making companies more competitive. What I will now do, given that we have a little bit of time left, is to just take you through a few such capabilities which are now available, which you can use to start driving these data acquisition capabilities, which can be converted into actionable insights. Logistics, I have already spoken to you about. In the manufacturing space, there are capabilities which we are currently working with, where you can acquire data in warehouse as a place where we bring stuff in, take stuff out, and normally there is not enough attention which is given to, okay, whether that place can be optimized, can be improved, can be streamlined. And in warehouses, you can deploy capabilities through, again, smart tags, which can make people safe by making sure that the ability to provide the outcomes which we need to achieve from a safety perspective, or we can use operational devices like scanning systems to get what is called a real-time view of what's happening in the warehouse, and then identify where I need to drive performance improvement in my warehouse operations. So these are the kind of capabilities which are now available, through which simple data acquisition can be done, can be consumed, can be transformed, and then you can get certain outcomes which you are looking at achieving in your supply chain performance. This is another interesting one which I think some of the people in the room are aware about, where we are bringing this capability into the country where you can put devices in your concrete and start getting in real time visibility of how your concrete maturity is happening, which is something which has not been experienced. In fact, when I go and talk to people, sometimes people don't believe it. You know, they say, is it something real? You put the sensor in concrete and it starts telling you what your concrete maturity is like, when it will be ready for striking, and you can plan your project effectively, which can drive performance improvement. So, in short, in a supply chain scenario, I think we are now sitting at a stage where if we make those data acquisition capabilities available in our work environment, we can then start consuming that data, overlaying it with existing systems to get insights which can then drive effective decisions and produce outcomes which we want to achieve. Within supply chain, it will work towards eliminating friction between trading parties. Whether it is going to happen now, I don't think so. Possibly 2 years, 3 years, when it gets to a point where it becomes affordable.
Cool. Thank you very much. Let's put a hand together.
Thank you.
What a night. That was our last speaker. Thank you very much for your patience and for leaning in. And this is really good. We're going to go into kind of a wrap-up mode now. If I could invite all the speakers to pop up. We just got a little token of our appreciation. Yes. Yes. So thank you very much for coming along. I think we will be sending one of these to Carmen as well. Great. Stand this side. Yes. Okay. And put a hand together for Adrian. Thank you very much. Thank you.
えー、まあ
Thank you, Michael. Very great. Who we got next? Mark. Really enjoyed your speech, mate. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we have one special for Tectorium, so please put hands together for Sam. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Awesome. Round of applause for our speakers and for our hosts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I get the pleasure of holding space for you. We're wrapping up. Before we go for our group photo, because we can't leave an event like this without a massive group photo, which our photographer, that's your warning. You've got about a minute. Just want to encourage you to kind of share a takeaway. So what are you leaving this evening with? What's one key insight or one thought or thing that's just take a moment to reflect on that. If you were driving away, what would you have in your rearview mirror as you're taking away from this conversation? Take a moment to think about that, and then I'd like to invite you to just grab someone and have a quick conversation with them about it and have a quick exchange. So when you're ready, go.
Thank you.
Sweet, yeah.